Welcome to the dairies of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the journey. The floor beneath his feet shimmered as if it could not decide whether it was solid matter or a polite suggestion. The human man decided not to test it. He stood very still, hands loosely at his sides, while the translation field buzzed around his head with the faint irritation of a device forced to interpret sarcasm. Before him rose the throne, grown rather than built, its surfaces alive with slow pulses of light that responded to the queen's breathing. She watched him with eyes dark and assessing, her long ears extending gracefully from her hair, moving almost imperceptibly as though listening not only to him, but to the room itself. He cleared his throat. The sound echoed far more dramatically than he intended. "For the record," he said, "this is not how I usually start conversations with royalty. I prefer coffee first." A ripple of murmurs moved through the alien court. One advisor stiffened. Another blinked twice, perhaps recalculating the probability of survival for a human with poor timing. The queen raised a hand, and the sound vanished instantly, swallowed by the chamber's obedient acoustics. Her gaze sharpened. The translation field hesitated, then delivered her words with regal clarity. "You stand accused of breaching sovereign space, disrupting orbital traffic, and showing insufficient respect." He tilted his head. "In my defense, your traffic patterns are a nightmare. Also, I bowed, internally." Her ears angled backward, a gesture that might have meant offense or mild curiosity. He decided to interpret it as the latter. Around them, thin streams of data drifted through the air, holographic records scrolling slowly like lazy constellations. His name appeared, slightly misspelled, rotating beside a glowing schematic of his very battered ship. The queen descended from the throne with controlled grace, her steps soundless against the living floor. Up close, she looked almost human, unsettlingly so, if not for those ears and the faint luminescence beneath her skin. "Intent is irrelevant," she said. "Law is not softened by charm." "That's unfortunate," he replied. "I've been relying on charm my whole life." A guard shifted, armor humming softly. The queen studied the human for a long moment, as if weighing him against something unseen. He met her gaze, feeling the familiar tightening in his chest that came whenever authority decided his fate. Still, he smiled, small and crooked, because panic had never improved his odds. "By the authority vested in me," she said at last, "you are condemned to confinement." The floor brightened. Somewhere below, mechanisms awakened. He exhaled slowly. "Dungeon?" he asked, "because I have opinions about that word." Her ears flicked forward. "You will find," she replied, "that our dungeons are advanced." "Well," he said as the light enveloped him and gravity politely gave up, "at least it'll be a new experience. That seems to be the theme of my life." The court vanished upward, replaced by a rushing tunnel of light, and as he descended into the unknown, he couldn't shake the strange, nagging feeling that this was not the first time fate and that throne had crossed paths. He landed with considerably more dignity than he expected, which immediately made him suspicious. The light released him onto a surface that felt soft, then firm, then politely warm, as if the floor were apologizing in advance. The space around him brightened on its own, revealing walls that glowed in slow, thoughtful colors. He waited for pain. None arrived. "Well," he said to no one in particular, "this is already better than most holding cells I've been in." A small hovering sphere drifted toward him, its shell translucent, its inner core blinking with cheerful insistence. "Welcome to corrective confinement," it announced. "Please refrain from existential screaming for the first 6 hours." He stared at it. "That seems specific." The sphere bobbed. "Previous data suggests screaming is less effective after hydration." A panel slid open in the wall and produced a cup that steamed faintly. He picked it up, sniffed, then shrugged and drank. It tasted like soup that had once heard of vegetables. He sat, then lay back, discovering that the floor adjusted to his weight with unsettling intimacy. Time stretched, or perhaps it folded. It was hard to tell in a place where there were no shadows. He tried pacing. The room expanded slightly, then stopped, as if indulging him just enough to remain polite. He laughed despite himself. "You're very accommodating," he told the room. "I don't deserve this." "Negative," the sphere replied. "You are statistically uncomfortable." That did it. He laughed out loud, the sound echoing softly, then dissolving before it could feel lonely. When the humor faded, memory crept in uninvited. Fire. Metal tearing open. A small, shaking form clutched against his chest while alarm screamed in a language no translator had time to learn. He frowned, pressing the thought away. Not now. A door did not open because there was no door, but an alien guard appeared anyway, stepping through a distortion that rippled like water. The guard glanced around, clearly unsure how to behave in a space designed to be kinder than necessary. "You require anything?" The guard asked, tone formal, eyes curious. "A window," he said, "or at least a complaint form." The guard hesitated. "I will log the request." "Appreciate it." When the guard vanished, the sphere drifted closer. "Rest cycle is advised." He lay back again, hands folded behind his head. "You know," he said quietly, "I once saved a kid and still ended up in prison. Universe has a sense of humor." "Humor acknowledged," the sphere replied. As the lights dimmed to a gentle twilight, he closed his eyes, unaware that far above, the echo of that memory had already begun to move. Above the dungeon that refused to feel like one, the palace continued its endless breathing. Corridors shifted subtly to accommodate thought and traffic, walls whispering data to one another in frequencies no human ear could survive without complaint. The queen stood alone in her private council chamber, hands clasped behind her back, staring at a floating lattice of reports that refused to arrange themselves into comfort. "Explain it again," she said. A thin, sharp-eyed advisor adjusted the projection with a flick of his fingers. The human violated restricted space. The sentence was lawful, efficient, textbook. "Textbooks," she replied, "have never ruled an empire." Her long ears angled outward, catching not sound but nuance. Something about the human lingered in her thoughts like a word on the tip of memory. He had not pleaded. He had joked. That unsettled her more than fear ever did. Another advisor leaned forward, attempting levity. "If it reassures you, Majesty, humans rarely survive prolonged boredom. The dungeon may solve itself." She gave him a look that suggested he would be better off testing that theory personally. Silence returned, broken only by the quiet hum of the chamber's intelligence field. "Run a deeper scan," she ordered. "Older records, civilian incidents, unclassified rescues." The lattice shimmered, then resisted. "Data fragmentation detected," the system replied. "Several files corrupted during a transport disaster 13 cycles ago." The queen's fingers tightened slightly. 13 cycles. Her ears drew back without her permission. The advisors noticed, exchanged glances, wisely said nothing. Elsewhere in the palace, a smaller chamber rang with a very different energy. A child sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by broken holographic animals, all frozen mid-prance. A caretaker sighed. "It was working moments ago." The child frowned in concentration. "It does that when it gets scared." "Scared of what?" "Fire," the child said matter-of-factly. "Everything is scared of fire." The caretaker paused. "How do you know that?" The child shrugged. "A human told me." High above in the council chamber, a soft chime interrupted the queen's thoughts. A newly reconstructed file bloomed into existence. Incomplete. Grainy. A visual of smoke, alarms, chaos, and a figure moving through it, carrying something small and luminous. The queen leaned closer, heart behaving in a way she did not appreciate. The face was blurred, the name missing, but the posture was unmistakable. Careless courage, protective irritation. She straightened slowly. "Summon the dungeon monitor," she said. "Yes, Majesty." And she added after a pause, "Bring me the human's full trajectory history. Every port, every rescue, every joke if recorded." Far below, the human sneezed, looked around the glowing room and muttered, "I really hope that wasn't fate warming up." The child's laughter echoed down the corridor in a way that confused the palace sensors. They dimmed the lights slightly, mistaking joy for a structural anomaly. The child did not notice. They were busy persuading a hovering cube to behave like a dragon, which mostly involved dramatic hand gestures and sound effects that no known species officially approved of. "Again," the child said. "The human did it better." The caretaker paused mid-step. "The human." "Yes, the loud one, the one who complained while saving me." "That narrows it down very little." The child tilted their head, ears flicking as memory surfaced with surprising clarity. "He said the fire was rude. Then he said I was heavier than I looked. Then he said, 'If we survive this, you owe me a quiet afternoon.'" The caretaker swallowed. "And did you?" "I survived," the child said proudly. "I don't think he ever got the quiet part." Above them, the queen watched the dungeon feed unfold in layered projections. The human was arguing with the confinement sphere about the definition of a nap. "This is not sleeping," he insisted. "This is strategic lying down." "Rest cycle remains unfulfilled," the sphere replied. The queen almost smiled. Almost. Her ears betrayed her instead, angling forward as recognition settled like gravity. 13 cycles ago. Smoke. Alarms. The world narrowing to a single terrified heartbeat in her arms before it was gone. Rescued by a stranger who had not known who she was, or what saving her child would one day cost him. "End the confinement," she said quietly. A junior official hesitated. "Immediately. Before he starts negotiating with the furniture." Light shifted. Gravity reconsidered itself. The human found his room politely dissolving around him. "Okay," he said, pointing upward as the familiar lift sensation returned. "If this is another dungeon, I'm filing a very stern internal complaint." He emerged into the throne chamber blinking, already mid-sentence. "And for the record, your soup needs seasoning." Silence answered him. The court stood frozen. The queen stepped forward, her expression unreadable, her long ears held perfectly still. "You once carried a child through fire," she said. He frowned. "That does sound like me. I do that sometimes, not often. Fire and I have an understanding." The child appeared beside her, peering around the throne. Their eyes widened. "It's him." The human looked down, recognition dawning slowly, gently. His voice softened without him noticing. "Hey," he said. "You're taller." The queen exhaled, a sound that held years of fear and authority and regret. The dungeon was forgotten. The sentence unraveled, and in its place stood a truth that refused to be polite or quiet or undone. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and expensive. The court waited for something decisive to happen, preferably without paperwork. The human shifted his weight, suddenly aware that standing casually in front of an alien throne with a rescued royal child nearby was not listed in any survival manual. "Well," he said at last, rubbing the back of his neck, "this is awkward, for everyone, especially me." The child stepped forward, studying him with open curiosity. "You said fire was rude." "I stand by that," he replied seriously. "Fire has no manners." A few advisors blinked. One of them coughed, perhaps to hide a laugh. The queen did not move. Her gaze remained fixed on the human, as if the universe had narrowed again, just as it had years ago, to a single improbable figure. "Why," she asked, voice controlled with great effort, "did you not identify yourself then?" He shrugged. "Didn't seem important. Kid needed saving. Titles slow you down. Also, everything was exploding." Her ears twitched, a subtle crack in composure. The court screens lit up with recovered fragments, distorted footage, emergency telemetry, a human ship barely holding together while alarms screamed in several incompatible languages. The human glanced at one projection and winced. "Oh wow," he said. "I forgot how bad my hair was back then." One advisor leaned toward another. "Is he mocking archival evidence?" "I think," the other replied, "it's a coping mechanism." The queen raised a hand. The displays dimmed. "You were condemned under my authority," she said, "unjustly." He waved the thought away. "Happens. I've been arrested for less, once for loitering in a vacuum." "That is not reassuring." "It shouldn't be." She stepped closer now, close enough that he could see the faint shimmer beneath her skin, the tension in her long ears as they angled forward. "What do you want?" she asked. "Compensation, honor, sanctuary." He considered this carefully, which surprised everyone, including himself. "Honestly, a working ship, maybe a meal that doesn't argue with me, and for the kid to be okay." The child nodded solemnly. "I am okay." "See," he said. "Mission accomplished." The queen studied him, then did something no one expected. She inclined her head just slightly. "Not a bow, something rarer." "Then," she said, "we must redefine justice." He smiled, tired but sincere. "Just promise me one thing." "What is that?" "No more dungeons with customer service. It sets unrealistic expectations." A laugh escaped someone in the court, then another. The tension loosened, not broken but transformed. And for the first time since the sentence was spoken, the future felt negotiable. The redefinition of justice turned out to be louder than anyone expected. Protocols argued with one another across the chamber, light forms clashing like offended philosophers. The palace intelligence attempted to reconcile mercy with precedent and briefly threatened to reboot itself out of protest. The human watched the chaos with interest. "Is it always like this?" he asked the nearest advisor. "Or did I unlock a special achievement?" "You are statistically disruptive," the advisor replied, almost admiringly. The queen stood at the center of it all, unmoving, her presence forcing order not through command but gravity. When she spoke, the systems quieted as if embarrassed. "Let the record show," she said, "that the sentence is nullified." A pause followed. Then another voice chimed in, overly cheerful. "Clarification required. Nullified sentences typically involve public acknowledgement." The human sighed. "I knew there'd be a catch." A platform rose beneath him before he could object, lifting him just enough to make escape undignified. The court focused its attention. The child grinned from beside the throne, clearly enjoying this far too much. The queen turned to the assembly. This human acted without obligation, without knowledge of consequence. Such actions fall outside our metrics of loyalty. "That's because loyalty metrics are overrated," the human muttered. She continued, ears held high. "Therefore, the law must adapt." A ripple passed through the court. Adaptation was rare. Uncomfortable, necessary. The human leaned into the moment. "If it helps, I accept applause in several formats." Silence. Then a single advisor clapped experimentally. Others followed, uncertain but curious, until the chamber filled with a sound that was not quite applause, not quite resonance, but unmistakably approval. The queen stepped closer once more. "You are free to go," she said. "Your ship will be repaired, your record amended." "And the dungeon?" he asked. "Repurposed," she replied. "The child suggests a museum." The child nodded, enthusiastically. "With soup." He laughed, a real one this time. "I'd be honored." As the court dispersed, the queen remained. "You could stay," she said quietly. "Advise, observe, disrupt." He considered it, stars flickering in his thoughts, then shook his head. "I don't do well with thrones. They make me itchy." Her ears softened. "Then go," she said, "but know this, you have altered more than a law today." He smiled gently. "Yeah, that happens sometimes." And as he walked away, escorted not by guards but by open doors, the empire adjusted its course by a fraction of a degree, just enough to matter. The ship took shape around him like a long-forgotten promise finally kept. Panels slid into place with soft clicks, systems waking one by one, greeting him with diagnostic complaints that felt almost affectionate. He rested a hand against the hull and smiled. It would fly. More importantly, it would leave. Behind him, the hangar opened onto stars arranged with ceremonial precision. The queen stood at a respectful distance, the child beside her, both watching as if this departure were a delicate equation that might still change its answer. The human climbed the ramp, then stopped, as if remembering something important he had nearly misplaced. He turned. "For what it's worth," he said, "you run a very impressive empire. Needs fewer wrongful imprisonments, but the lighting is excellent." The queen inclined her head, the motion unburdened now. "And you," she replied, "remain uniquely difficult to classify. Been my lifelong struggle." The child stepped forward, holding out a small device no larger than a coin. "So you don't forget us." He accepted it gently. "I wasn't planning to." The device activated, projecting a tiny, flickering star map, one point blinking steadily. A place, or perhaps an invitation. He closed his fingers around it and felt something unfamiliar settle into him. Not obligation, not duty, connection. As the ramp sealed and the engines warmed, he took his seat and glanced once more at the readouts. His name was no longer flagged in hostile red. His record bore an annotation instead, written in careful alien script that translated loosely to "acted without reason, achieved much." He laughed under his breath. "Yeah," he said, "that tracks." The ship lifted smoothly, passing through the palace shields as easily as memory through time. Below, the queen watched until the stars swallowed him. Her empire would continue, stronger, altered, quietly reshaped by one human who had refused to be afraid when it mattered. In the void beyond the hangar, he set a course not for the nearest port but slightly off it. Not lost, just open. He felt different now. Not braver, not wiser, simply more aware that small acts echoed farther than laws ever could. The engines hummed. The stars stretched. Somewhere behind him, a dungeon became a museum, a child slept without fear, and a ruler remembered mercy not as weakness but as strength. He leaned back, hands steady on the controls. "All right," he said to the universe, grinning. "Let's see what else you've been hiding."